because this is our last session of 2025. There are lots of good session we conducted on this year actually. And for those who don't know me, I am Tanesh Kumar. I'm the one of the co-organizer of this user group, and I will be the host of this session today. So before we begin the session, I just want to thank you, all the speakers, all the supporters, all the members who are actively, participating in the sessions and in the community contributions. This year is actually amazing for us in terms of community, meetups and sessions. A lot of supports from other companies as well. It's a great to see in the growing Umbraco in Umbraco in India actually. So it's a great thing for us as a passionate Umbraco developer. So yeah, so today we are very happy to have Phil Whitaker with us today. Phil is an AI staff engineer at Umbraco, and he will be speaking on mastering the subart of MCP. So he will make sure that we can understand MCP, how it works under the hood, and we can get some insights from Phil about the real world implementation and how we can implement it on Umbraco. So without taking much time, Phil, over to you.
Okay, thanks. I'll just try and share my screen if that's okay. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much, Dan, for the introduction to my talk, The Subtle Art of MCP. So my name is Phil Whitaker, as Dana said. I'm a staff engineer at Umbraco, concentrating on a lot of AI stuff, internally helping people on board with AI and also creating MCPs. So we've just released the first MCP, and we're now working on other MCPs as well around editors and other parts of the business. So I've been at Umbraco for about 4 months now, from about August, and yeah, it's great to be working for the mothership after all these years of being involved in Umbraco from a community perspective. So without further ado, I'll start talking about MCP and what MCP. So it was introduced by Anthropic in November 2024. It was introduced really as an open source standard protocol to help AI systems to mitigate the complexities of RAG and tool calling in AI and agentic systems. So if anybody's used the frameworks and the APIs to create function calling and tool calling, I think before this was released, you quickly realized how complicated it was. And this kind of took all the complexity and made it quite simple to do, really. So this talk's a couple of months old now, and I've updated it for today. But when I was doing this talk, I realised that I didn't understand actually what MCP meant and stood for. And I understood the words of what it was, but it took me a while to deconstruct them to work out actually what it means under the hood. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, which is very much a word salad, I think, until I kind of work out what it is and what it means. So if we could deconstruct this, model is the LLM. Context is about getting the right context to the model at the right time. And protocol is designed to be shared and widely adopted, just like HTTP as another protocol. And it's open source, as I've already said, and it's also it's just been adopted. It's just been given by Anthropic into the Agentic AI Foundation as an open standard that's going to be used by lots of people, and it's been adopted by loads of organisations out there. I mean, it's only just 13 months old now, and it's amazing how far it's come. And what they say is that it's really there to solve something called the M times N integration problem by creating a universal open standard for AI applications to connect with anything. So that's a lot of words there, and they broke it down in their first blog post into this. So think as MCP as the USB-C port for AI applications. So when they first did their first blog post, this is what they called it. This is the analogy that they used. And I tend to think from one side, this is a really good analogy. So USB-C is designed really for lots of people, well, lots of things to plug in to each other, and makes it really easy. It's a great standard around that. And this is exactly what MCP does. It gives you the ability to plug anything into an LLM, which is really, really powerful, especially as I've said earlier on, that it was very complicated and hard to manage in the past. So to get standards behind it is great. But the problem is that when I talk to other people, specifically non-technical people, I found that they don't really understand what USB-C is and the importance of it, and why it's such a big deal. So I came up with a different analogy, which I've talked about internally with Umbraco and with lots of other people externally. And that's the idea that MCP really is like a pick and mix. So the idea is you're setting out your stall of available elements that the LLM can choose from. So the key thing here really is that when you give the LLM a task, the model a task to do, the agent a task, then it comes in and it picks and chooses the elements that it wants to use to complete that particular task. Now, it's important to realize that you have absolutely no control over what tools, what elements it's going to use to complete that task. And this is key to understanding MCP really, is you're setting out a stall. I've recently started to talk about agents as a great mix between deterministic and non-deterministic thinking. So with an agent, you give it a task to do, and the completion of that task is a deterministic act. So you want it to complete it to the same level of standard as you complete the task, as you want the agent to complete the task. But it can complete that task in any way it wants to complete it, using any tool, any combination, any structure, any workflow that it wants to complete. You're just testing at the end that it's completed the task to the way that you want it to complete it. And this is really what MCP is and what it enables here. So I see it very much as this pick and mix idea. I'm setting out a stall of things that the LM can choose from, and that's my act here. So if we dig into the protocol and actually what it means, so we have an MCP client which sits as a one-to-one relationship between the client and the LM, and that's hosted within a solution, Cursor, Visual Studio Cloud, Cloud Desktop, all sorts of solutions out there that host these MCP clients. And then these then link to a MCP server. In this case, in this example, we'll have an Umbraco MCP server, and that will then connect to an external entity. So in this case, it's Umbraco, and it may connect to lots of different things within Umbraco, lots of different elements that it can choose. So create documents, get data types, and in the case of the Umbraco MCP, many, many, many more. So then I want to talk about the relationship between servers and clients. So clients really, they have a one-to-one relationship between that and the LM, and they're really to guide, to route, to control information between the LM and the server. And it turns out that you can have many servers attached to one client. So there's a one-to-many relationship between clients and servers. You can also have different types of servers. So the Umbraco developer MCP that we've got launched now, that's a local MCP server. It operates locally on your machine. Another example of that is the file system MCP that Anthropic released. It's a very simple MCP. It's there to read, update, add new files, list directories, add new directories, delete files, etc. It's quite simple, but really effective. And then you can have remote MCP servers as well. And these are hosted remotely somewhere on the web, and are usually just an endpoint that you connect to. The benefit of hosting MCPs, just like hosting websites really, is that it allows a vendor to have much more control over this. And it's much easier to connect to from a user's perspective, but they are a lot more complicated to set up, especially if you connect them to OAuth and authentication and authorization around this. And that's what we're concentrating on now. That's what we're doing on Umbraco, is starting to look at remote MCPs, as well as the existing MCPs that we've got. So I've talked about the elements of MCP, and from an MCP server perspective, there are 3 types of elements. There are initially tools, and tools are functions really. They are things that allow you to connect to the outside world. They're actions. And to allow you to the LLM to access the outside world based on the user request. So that could be databases, external API calls, modified files, anything really out there connecting to SQL databases is one as well. And to be honest, the vast majority of the MCPs out there take advantage of tools because they have a one-to-one relationship between function calling and tool calling with an LLM, so it's very easy for people to move across to that. And then we have 2 more elements within here: resources and prompts. And these are both parameterized. They can be parameterized. And we'll start with resources. So resources are passive data sources, passive and read-only data sources that provide information for the context of the current session. So that could be file imports, database schemas. It could be calling and getting a document type that you want to bring into context. And this gives you much more control over what you have in your context, what you have available to the LLM for it to make decisions and to make actions using tools. The parameterization means that you can set up one resource and it can call multiple data types if you give it the ID to call that. Prompts are saved conversations. So say you have a conversation that you know works really, really well for an action within Umbraco, and you've developed this series of prompts to get to the point of having the conversation where you want it to be. And these are just what prompts are really, just pre-built instruction templates. And these can be parameterized as well, so you can pass in data to affect the outcome of these. So talking about the Umbraco MCP itself specifically, so myself and Matt Wise developed this in April, May this year. And it was adopted by Umbraco at Code Garden this year, and it's a reasonably large MCP. I think it's one of the largest out there, especially in terms of tool counts. And we connect down to the management API, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute. But we have now 100% coverage, minus a couple of areas which have no value and that would give us security concerns for things like increasing the user ability, adding roles to users, those types of things. So yeah, this is the Umbraco MCP. It's out there, people using it and finding it very useful from what I hear. So I wanted to give an example of what the Umbraco MCP does and how it works. So this is the situation that Matt and I, when we first turned on the MCP, this is the first serious task that we gave it. And if you're used to working with Umbraco and you're used to taking on new sites, this is something that's very useful and something that takes a bit of time. So we asked it the question, this is literally the prompt we gave it. Please move all unused data types into an unused data type folder. And this is how it went on with this. So I've not trained it how to do this. I've just given that question. And the first thing it's going to do is read all the data types and then start to immediately go through and use this isUsed data type endpoint to work out whether each one of these data types is used. This is a little known API endpoint, but because it has an awareness of most of the endpoints, of all of the endpoints, then it knows how to use it. So before I've even got through this spiel, it's worked out all it is used. It's created a new folder for the data types, for the unused data types. It's given me a list of them, the one that's going to move, and it started moving them, which is pretty incredible, really, to be able to do this. And as I said, I've not trained it how to do this. There's no pre-thought around this. I've just given it this question. And if you're used to using Umbraco, you know how difficult this actually is to do, how time consuming this is. You have to go into each data type, go into the info file tab, worked out whether it's used or not, and then yeah, and it's done it. Before I could even say it, it's actually done it. It's moved that across. And developers are starting to use this MCP to do all sorts of tasks, to do tasks that are would take a long time in the UI to get right, to do, that are quite fiddly, and they're able to do that. And to be honest, when I first turned this on, it was a little bit of magic, really, to be able to see it. And the LLM was able to, given the tool set that were given it, was able to understand Umbraco, understand how it works, understand how to put together a workflow, a task to complete that without me actually telling it, without also telling it how to do that. So that's the Umbraco MCP and how it works. So under the hood, I mentioned the Umbraco Management API, and the Umbraco MCP is absolutely, it's critical. The management API was for this. Really, the MCP is just, the Umbraco MCP is just a wrapper around this management API. And that's because the management API in the new back office from 14 onwards, anything that happens in the back office, it has to go through this management API. So that meant that we could create the Umbraco MCP by wrapping elements of the API to do anything that the back office can do, which is quite amazing, really. And the LLM was able to compose specific tools to make that happen in new and unique and interesting different ways, because the UI, I see the UI, which, I mean, the Umbraco back office is amazing, but it is very set and it's very opinionated about certain UX flows. And by freeing up an agent to come in and pick and choose what tools it wants to use from its pick and mix options, it was quite revolutionary in what it was able to do. But that came with difficulties, and this talk really is around how we achieved that and some of the lessons that came out from that. And yeah, so we've just seen the Swagger implementation that's backed by the OpenAI schema and implementation within Umbraco, which makes the Swagger and that documentation perfectly possible. Now with the MCP side, and with lots of sites out there, what we tend to do is we take that Swagger documentation, that JSON file that produces the schema that it produces, and we choose tools like Hey API, or we happen to use something called Orval, which is very similar, to generate all our clients for us. So to generate the models, to generate the client stubs, etc. And it works incredibly well. That it's able to produce those, and we can just start using it without actually having to set up those models for us. And when we first started doing this, started setting up the MCP, we quickly realized, or Orval quickly released an MCP code generation tool for us to be able to create an MCP on the fly based on the schema generation. And we looked at this, and it was okay, but it caused lots of problems. And the reason is because when you create a client or an MCP client, or the models and the client behind it, it creates code that's very highly optimized. It's tied to their coding style, and it's quite difficult to understand what's in there, really, and how it's set up. Now, there is the opportunity to override how this code is generated, but that is sat at a level of abstraction above the actual code. So you have to always think above that rather than the actual code itself. So it becomes quite hard to override, and it's quite hard to override individual items or to add new ones into the system, especially when at the press of a button you can just regenerate everything, and keeping ones abstracted and separate from that gets quite difficult. Overriding code gets very complicated, and it becomes very, very difficult to debug. And from my perspective, and one thing that I'm very keen on, it was very hard to create integration tests on top of this. So there is another option for this. So there's this solution called FastMCP, which is more Python-based than TypeScript-based. They were set up, and we read their blogs, and they said this: stop converting REST APIs to MCP, which is a bit clickbaity, to be honest. And when we dug into this, and they actually started talking about and saying, well, it is a good starting point. There are some endpoints that will benefit from this, some simple endpoints, which is, we have a lot of that in the Umbraco MCP, but the issue was we came to find that we needed to update things, add, tweak, change, manipulate stuff. And this is what they're saying is that using these tools like FastMCP, because that has a tool to move APIs and create MCPs on top of it, and it has does a reasonable job of being able to adapt and change those, but it still doesn't have the level of control that you need. And this point is the starting point, and this is what we found exactly with the Umbraco MCP as well. And this is work that's ongoing now, is to take this this initial creation, which very quickly got us to something that works and reasonably well, and we're tweaking it and updating it and improving it all the time. Last week I released 2 new endpoints, 2 new tools, which will allow you to update individual properties on documents and individual properties on block schemas and properties. And it's made a big difference to how it works. And it's only possible because we're able to update things. So instead of using these tools, the generation tools, to create our code, we settled on using Claude Code for this. We live in this amazing world now where deterministic code generation is fine, but there are lots of subtle changes and differences and subtle tweaks in the management API which you need to handle, and AI is so much better at that than generating the code and putting fixes on top of it. So we gave it a series of base patterns, base understanding, base tools. We worked really hard actually on creating the base structures and how things were going to be built on top of it. And then we created a series of integration tests. So we created the structures behind that, how we wanted tests to be created, the builder patterns that we wanted to use, the test helpers that we wanted to use, and how we wanted to use them. And then some example integration test patterns and the type of tests that we wanted to do. Now, these integration tests, when we run them, they actually run directly into Umbraco and make changes into Umbraco. And they're really useful and really powerful for us. To help us do this, we set up sub-agents behind it, so they had understanding of the separate roles and the tasks, what we wanted to do. And we've now got to the point where we have a swarm of these agents. And when we had new endpoints added, or when we had a new group of endpoints added, then we can just get it to create everything for us and the full structure for us. And that ends up as our starting point to start manipulating and managing and updating and understanding how best to make it communicate with the LLM. So moving on from this, I'll start talking about MCPs and the structure behind it and that manipulation and how that happens. So this is a very basic MCP tool, and we'll concentrate mainly on tools for this talk. So this is an example that's not Umbraco based at all. This is taken from the documentation. And to break this down, we have an internal name for the tool, which is what the LLM sees as a first port of call. And then we have a title and a description. This is a human readable title rather than the title above. And then we have an input schema. So this tells the LLM what data to send to the tool, what the structure of the data should be, or what its format should be, what its schema should be, etc. And then finally, we have the function call. So this is what the tool runs. In this case, it's just making a very simple call to an API endpoint, pulling back the data, and then passing it back to the LM. So this looks really simple as a structure. And when we first saw that, we just said, "Is that it, really?" But then we quickly came to the realization that this is where the subtlety lies. There's so much you can do with this, and so much that you need to think about, because we're talking about non-deterministic systems here, and inference. You need to really work through that and understand how that impacts the LLM and how it will make use of these tools. So we'll go through each of these and go into a bit more detail on it. So names and the computer readable name of an MCP is so important, because this is the first thing it sees and the most important thing that it sees into making a decision as to what tool to use in what scenario and how. This is the basis of your pick and mix. So choose descriptive names that say exactly what the tool is meant to do in the shortest possible level. Avoid similar names, because those can confuse the LLM. If you have names that are very similar, then it will choose potentially the wrong one for the tasks that you've given it, or it might choose them differently dependent on different scenarios, because it's completely non-deterministic. So create a name that has conventions behind it. So we were incredibly lucky in the management API that it's so well set up, and the naming conventions behind it is so well managed that it just works straight away, because the names are set up to be so confusing and so structured in their output. So it always starts with the method, really, gets, is, updates, deletes, that type of thing. And then it continues with the entity that it's actually affecting, data types, document types, documents, users, user groups, that sort of stuff. And then it follows on usually with the action that's happening, roots, children, ancestors, search, that type of stuff. So it was really easy for the LLM to understand what these are and how they're set up. And that's really, really important. Because it reduces the cognitive load and reduces the possibility of hallucination as well. Next up is descriptions. So I see these really as acting like internal prompts and internal prompt engineering. So these allow you to say exactly what the tool is to do, and they form the backing to the tool name. So they clarify when and how the tool should be used, and that improves model behavior no end. They give it instructions, steps, lists of things to do, include guidance like usage constraints and examples of how to use it and when to use it and why. But always remember that we're working in a non-deterministic environment here, so it might ignore your description entirely. It might decide to do something else. So it's really important to be aware that sometimes determinism, and I'll talk about that in a little minute, is more important than putting descriptions in here. These are guidance only. Now, the models are getting better all the time, but yeah, it's important to be aware that that can happen. And also, it's important to be aware that you will be presenting this to multiple models who will have multiple nuances behind how they look at these things. So I know that Anthropic likes to they're models like tags and XML structures, and they work really well with those, whereas OpenAI stuff doesn't tend to do that. So beware of that as well when you're creating descriptions. Working down the list, it's important to be able to annotate your scheme of properties as well. So putting more information in here to tell the LLM exactly what it needs to provide validation, whether things are optional, descriptions as well onto your properties can really help with an LLM's understanding of how it can use this tool and how it can move it forward. So yeah, really, really important to do this. Now, I won't say that we do this all the time, because every time that you add a description like this, it adds to the tokens that you're using, but it can be really useful if you're struggling with getting an LLM to use a tool in exactly the right way. Continuing to talk about input schemas and input parameters. We have a scenario in Umbraco where we have very large JSON documents, specifically the documents themselves that are sent to Umbraco. And large documents, they are quite hard for LLMs to create and to structure, which is why I just talked about earlier on the new tools for updating properties that I've created. So it's really important to simplify these input parameters. Sometimes the endpoints that you'll have, especially in the ones in the Umbraco, are meant to be handled by UIs, and UIs don't mind how big the JSON structure that you're passing is, but an LLM certainly would. They're often deeply nested or complex inputs, as you can see here. Also, especially within the create document, they will include things like creation of UIDs, and that makes that's very difficult for an LLM to get right, and should happen deterministically. It's also great to simplify the schemas. If there are defaults, then don't expect the LLM to generate those. And sometimes it makes sense to break tools apart, which I've already just kind of talked about. So yeah, we do this. We use this strategy all the time to improve the performance of the LLM and how it pushes data through. We also bundle things together, actions together. So when we first started doing the Umbraco MCP, Umbraco is just full of trees all over the place, and the LLM understood how to work with trees, but they were quite time consuming most of the time. So you had the situation where a document tree structure, and to understand all the document types, it needed to spider through that tree to get it working, and to gain a full understanding of what that was. And that took a lot of time for it to do, and was prone to error as well. So what we did is we bundled all of this into as a temporary measure into a single tool call to get all the information. And it was much more efficient to do that, and it could just get all the information it required. Now, I'm talking to people working on the management API at Umbraco to introduce some direct API calls, can get flattened structures in simpler ways. And this just shows how we're going to be improving the management API moving forward to support different consumers of the API, not just the UI of the back office as well. So yeah, it's really important to be able to do that, to be able to understand how to do that. And that leads me on to something I'm quite passionate about, which is granularity versus specificity in MCP tooling. So I've just said that you can bundle your tools into your API calls into a single tool, and that works well. But having many small composable tools works really well as well. And the reason is because if you have, it comes down to this idea of the pick and mix as well. If you have a few tools, the LLM doesn't have many options to connect to use. It doesn't have much options, and it can only do a certain number of things in a certain number of ways, and it can't compose those tools together. So it limits the possibilities that the agent can do. And if you have so few tools, you might as well do it deterministically, to be honest, because the benefit of the agent is so minimal. But having lots and lots of small tools, it can be great, and it can create that magic element of being able of the AI and the agent being able to compose those in new and interesting and innovative ways. But the problem with that is it might get confused if you don't have the right naming, the right structures behind that. It might get confused as to the right tools to use in the right way. So this is very much a spectrum here, and it's down to the use case of what you have as to how many tools and what you're going to do and what you're going to present. Again, it's down to the pick and mix idea at the start of the talk. So this is something that we consider all the time, when to use composable tools and when to use single tools. And we've been talking about an editor MCP, and that will specifically be more focused on specific tasks and specific tooling rather than composition of tooling as we move it forward. Next is API error messages. So you need them to be clear, descriptive. Don't just send the HTTP response codes back. They really help the LM to understand how to reason and recover from failures. Now with Umbraco, we're really useful, we're really lucky with the management API. It produces and returns really good error messaging and really good understanding of what's happened. The issue, when we first turned on the MCP and we first built it, we forgot to include to return API error messages. And yeah, the result was that our LLMs and our agents, when they caused an error and when they were creating the large documents, they caused an error quite a lot. They hunted around in the dark to try and find what went wrong, and they guessed to try and fix the problem, and that was a real nightmare for them, and they really struggled with that. And when we turned on the return of error messages back to the LM, it was like night and day. Honestly, it was brilliant to see. They could see what went wrong, and then they could adapt and change their next tool call to improve things, and you know, the results were great behind that. So yeah, really important error messages. So the brilliance of MCP lies in its subtlety. It provides many control surfaces that we've just seen. It looks really simple, but you need to tweak these for optimal results, and we've seen this time and time again whilst producing the Umbraco MCP. And I think that's why people are getting good results out of it, because we're taking that time to tweak for these optimal results. So what I want to talk about now is something called context engineering. Context engineering, well, no, sorry, I missed my timing. So you can never be entirely in control of what the LLM's output is. And that's because it's non-deterministic. You're in control in standard deterministic programming. You're in control of the output. You're in control of what happens. You can produce unit tests and integration tests around this, but you're never in control. Only hope to influence it enough to a positive outcome, and that's key in my understanding, is that you're only influencing it, that you're only giving it the right information at the right time to try and coax it, to influence it into that positive outcome. So I guess really that makes me and everybody that's using AI today into AI influencers. We're not AI controllers, we are just AI influencers at the end of the day. So MCP should be seen as this adapter layer, allowing developers to influence how models perceive and use what is provided in the outside world. And that's key here. It should also be seen as a frontier to undertake something called context engineering. Now, I think this is becoming a more common phrase now, but when I first gave this talk, there was very few people understood what context engineering was. So I'll give a brief overview of that. So context engineering is the practice of providing an LLM with only the relevant information it needs to achieve accurate and reliable results. So if we go back to the start as to what context engineering is and what specifically context is. So if at the start of this, when ChatGPT was launched, this was what context was. It was the latest response from the AI model. It was all the previous responses and all the questions. It might include a file, in this case, an Excel document. It might include a Word document. It might include an image, but this was the entirety of context. That has changed immeasurably now, and the pressures on context has grown and grown over the last 6 months. So this is a screenshot from Claude Code with their great context tool, which shows you exactly what's happening within your context window given a time. So context for Claude Code 4, this is a little bit of an older image now, but this has not changed really in how it works. So Claude Sonnet 4, your context window is 200,000 tokens long, which sounds like a lot. But if you take a context window, a token as being usually around about 4 tokens long, that's only about a meg in size, which is not a lot of information at all. And look at all the pressures on that. You've got system prompts at 1.5%. So that tells Claude Code, tells the LLM what Claude Code is, how it works, what structures it uses, how to be an engineer. You've got system tools, system MCP tools, that it turns out. They are Bash, or it might be going out to the web to research, that type of thing. And then we've got MCP tools. There's not a lot in there. So these are customer added MCP tools. You've got memory files. So these are rules, instructions, etc. And these tell the LM from a project's perspective what this project does and how it works and how to use it. And finally, you've got your messages. Now, this is the clear session that I've got set up here, and it has this is a clean session, and it's only using 8 tokens. But before we get started, we're already using 14% of our context window without actually adding any MCP tools on here. So it's really important to be aware of this and to understand how this impacts your flow. It's also important from the perspective of something called context rot. So it turns out this is a technical report by a company called Chroma in the US that do databases. And they started about 3 or 4 months ago, started talking about how the number of tokens that you have in your context window, that they really affect the results from your LLMs and the outputs from your LLMs. And I've recently seen that this is improved, but it's important to be aware of this. This is a logarithmic scale. So, 100 tokens, and it affects some LLMs quite drastically to 30% decrease in output quality. And all LLMs are not created equally. So if we look here, Claude Sonnet 4 is pretty good to about 5,000-ish, or maybe more than that, 5,000-7,000. So that's pretty good. But it's still having an impact on it. As I said, this is getting better, and this is the improvements that LLMs are going to go through in the time. So it's important to realize that every token that you add counts. And this is what context engineering really is. It's about making sure you only have the right information at the right time to influence the output of your LLM to get the best possible results out of it. And if you don't do that, if you put things in there that are contradictory, that are conflicting, then you're too much information, you're much more likely to get hallucination and poor outcomes. That's really, really important for that. So how do we manage context size strategically from an MCP perspective? So this is the same context window with the Umbraco MCP added and a lot of tools added to it. And as you can see, we've got 340 tools in here, and if to add all of those, it would probably take the whole of the context window up. And this is a concern that MCP developers has had for a while now, is the number of the amount of the size of the context window that it takes up. As you can see here, I don't know exactly what I've got added here, but it's taking up 60% of the token of the context window. So it's really important to manage that correctly. So with every MCP host, there is the ability to turn on and off tools as you want to, as you need to manage this context window in better ways. And we found that aligning with your specific use case is really, really important for you to do this. Now, turning off and on tools as you go is really hard work. So at Umbraco, we've created a series of ways to manage what tools are presented to the LLM. So first of all, we set up a way to turn tools on and off in a similar way to this. And then we group together all the tools into things called tool collections. So you can say that I only want to add in document types, data types, and that reduces the number of tools that you have available to it based on the use case that you've got. I'm currently working on a new feature where we're able to group tool collections together into modes. So you can have a mode for content modeling, etc. And also working on the ability to vertically slice tooling, so that you can say, I only want create, read, update, and delete. I don't want to add reference tools, that type of stuff. I don't want to add folder tools in there. I want to add. So you can really decide and choose exactly what tools you want for a specific use case, which makes handling your context and your context window much easier. So this is changing a little bit now, and the way that I'm going to be handling this, and the reason that I've added all this ability to add tools and tool collections and slicing and modes and all this type of stuff, is that people have discovered that having a direct connection from an MCP client to an MCP server is quite inefficient. As you can see, the context window usage is quite high. So what Anthropic have started talking in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks about something called code execution. And what that will mean is that you will have something that sits in between your MCP server and client, and will dynamically use the MCP server by writing code dynamically to pick and choose the tools that it needs. So if I have slicing in there, it's very easy, and collections and etc. It's very easy for code execution to write the right code to pull back the information it needs for the specific task. So your pick and mix becomes a dynamic thing that the LLM has another option another way to use it. And people have said they're having 98% fewer token used around that. And it's an exciting new forefront in the way to use MCP. Not that it's going to affect the Umbraco MCP, it'll just make it more efficient. So next one to talk about, I kind of hinted at it earlier on, is client and host nuances that we have, and being aware of that from an MCP perspective as well. So these two products are produced by the same company, Anthropic, but they work with MCP in very different ways. The behavior across those clients works in different ways. So for example, Claude Code does not understand prompts at all. It has no awareness. It doesn't know how to use them. Some tools will also invoke things like resources, and some tools won't. So be aware and have an understanding of your client's UI model. And it's key to understanding between when to use tools, when to use prompts, when to use resources wisely. And then you've got other things like NA10, which it uses agents. Well, it's an agent that uses MCP tools in completely different ways to this. And then you've got SDKs around agents as well. So it's really important to understand how those are affected. It's really important to understand that models will change as well. In September, when GPT-5 came out, it was people were in uproar because it was slightly more abrupt. It was a bit more confrontational in the ways that it worked. And people really missed 4.0, and they ended up having to bring back 4.0 as well, 4.0, sorry. And it was quite interesting to see that. Everything is going to keep changing at pace, and new models need new quirks. We have things called evaluations that sit around the Umbraco MCP that can test around separate models to make sure that things still work in the right way, because prompts will likely need optimizing when models change. There's a great story around Cursor when GPT-5 came out, and the problem was that it didn't work. So they just pushed in GPT-5, and Cursor just stopped working for that particular model, and they had to go back and tweak their prompts and their structures and their agentic flows to handle GPT-5 better. So it happens to everybody, this. So finally here, I talked about this right at the start of the talk. You can have MCP clients that connect to multiple MCP servers. And these are classic example of ones that I use quite often. So Figma and Playwright and Umbraco working together. Now, having MCPs work together is amazing. This particular stack is great. So being able to read the designs, being able to make changes to code and understand content modeling, and then to be able to understand the LLMs, understand the change it's made and whether it's worked on that, combining with the Umbraco input and the Figma input. But it's really important to understand that if you have MCPs that have similar use cases and have similar tools in them, it's just going to confuse the LLM and make things really, really difficult. So if you have multiple MCPs, make sure that then they don't cross over in what they do. And then provide system level guidance so the model knows how to choose between the different domains that it has available. So I see MCP very much as adopting iterative mastery on it. I'm still learning so much around this. I see it as quite similar to chess. It's really easy to pick up. You can pick it up in an afternoon, but it's incredibly difficult to master. Exactly the same as SQL. Understanding SQL and the basics of it is really quite simple, but understanding the subtleties of it is quite hard. And always expect to be changing things, expect things to be new models coming out to refine schemas, naming, error handling, context management over time, because AI moves at pace. I often say that a month in AI world at the minute is like 6 months in normal world, because everything just changes so quickly and it's hard to keep up with. So here's a QR code for the Umbraco MCP server if you want to have a dig around and see how things work, see how things are set up. If you want to commit pull requests, I'm up for to new ideas, new possibilities. If you find any issues with the Umbraco MCP, we've got an issue tracker on there as well. Just contribute. I'll be really interested to see what people are thinking. So thank you very much for your time and for listening to me today. And if anybody's got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, for the amazing session. So do you have any questions? Please ask. I think everyone has access to unmute the mic, and if you have any question, you can ask. Otherwise, you can write it in the chat, actually. Maybe I will start with my question, actually, Phil. So I have a question, like, you mentioned about we need to be aware when we are using multiple MCPs, right? So there would be a very common scenario, like as you just explained, like, if we have a Figma, then we need to pull that Figma and we need to create a same structure in the back office. So in a way, it's I think it's a very common thing when we are thinking about a web application actually. So
Yes.
so if even if we need to achieve that, can we run sequentially? Like first of all, we
Yeah.
can pull the Figma and we can give the instruction to the Umbraco MCP, and Umbraco MCP will create the back office structure based on the prompt that we are pulling from the Figma. Is
Yeah.
that work or?
Yeah, so I have worked in these kind of ways on some sites I produced earlier in the year, and yeah, the way that I would do that is I would go to the Figma and I would get it to create plans out of that. I would get it to create structures and try and understand what it's going to produce. And then I would probably go in and manually edit those because it will make mistakes. Content modeling and one-to-one relationships between UI definitions and content models is not easy to do. I know from experience. And so yeah, I would get it to do that, to create the plan, you edit it, and then when you're happy with it, get it to create the structures with an Umbraco using the MCP.
Okay. So what I understand is like we can't put the entire prompt. That is not an efficient. So what we need to do is like we need to redefine it based on our specification, and so we need to apply one by one. Let's say if we want to create a content, first of all we won't tell the MCP to just to create a content on this structure. First of all, we need to create data type, and from there we need to create the document type, and then the template, and then the content. Right? That's how it needs to.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I always believe in getting it to create steps instructions, especially for
Mm.
long things. I call these content requirement documents. So create a document which says, I want a data type that does this. I want a document type, and get the AI to create that based on the design that you have. But it's not just like the creation in the Umbraco side. It's once you've got it in the Umbraco side and you've got it, you're happy with that. It's creating the markup and the structures in your front end based on that, and then using the playwright to make sure that the design is fulfilled and also the structure in the Umbraco CMS is fulfilled as well.
Okay, yeah, got it. Can we validate the output? As you mentioned, I think we can't validate the output, or we can't have the access, or we can't control the output of the LLM, right? So
Yeah, no,
when it comes to Umbraco, we are actually directly dealing with the Umbraco database actually. So if
yeah,
something is happen messy, so how we can is there any way to validate based on our own implementation in between the MCP and the real Umbraco? Can we add a bridge or kind of validation kind of things in between that?
yeah, so I have done that quite a lot is validation stuff. I so validation using LLMs because of its non-deterministic nature is quite difficult because you'll get different outcomes every time, yeah.
Mm.
So so what I've tended to do with that is used a non-deterministic and deterministic collaboration. So using something like skills in Claude Code, where you can have it create virtual environments based on scripts. Yes, I would do that. Is the way that I would handle it, and it's a really great way to get the benefits, the magic of the LLM, but the surety of a deterministic script that you've got set up.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, Afreed has something.
Yep. So like you talked about skills, and I was in the Umbraco Summit last day, and
Yes,
like we were discussing about the new thing that's coming out, like Umbraco Skills Marketplace.
right.
So I have looked into the GitHub, and like it's only for Claude, right? So
Yeah,
I was actually working with Cursor right now. So do you
right.
have like any suggestion, like how I can make it work in Cursor? These
Um,
days, what I do is like I actually publish the Umbraco site, and like I will reference the Umbraco code from the like www root, you can get, yeah. That's how I do right now. But
Yeah.
this is a better way, I think. So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the issue is skills are a very new thing. They've been only around for about 6, 7, 8 weeks now, and people are still getting used to them. And I know that they're getting implemented in different solutions. I know Codex are starting to work on it, OpenAI are starting to work on it, and we do need a common way to share these. So yeah, I mean this series of skills that I have at the minute on my, I don't know whether it's the same one we're talking about on my GitHub.
yep.
They are very much in alpha at the minute, and it's a case of playing around with them. So I would use these skills and probably move them as to where you want them to be from a cursor perspective, and we will probably have to think about this sometime, but it's very much in alpha. It's I'm playing around at the minute in how these are used. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anyone else? I think we can use this opportunity because it's a right opportunity to ask about the MCP and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. If you'd like to.
I just want to say the Umbraco MCP is very good. I've been using it for months now, and I'm just very happy for the team to make this happen. So yeah, thank you. Just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to hear that people are using it, and I hear quite a lot that it's making a bit of a difference. So which is really nice to see.
Yeah, it does make a difference, and I think a month ago I also reported an issue where I was using it to make a completely new page, and it had some. I think it was my first time, so the AI itself didn't know it well, but it created document type instead of document type with template. So
Yeah.
that was something interesting to report.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing and in some ways the weird thing about working with AI, and I've had this quite a few times, is we're not getting very many issues reported, because if somebody finds an issue, they just put a workaround into their instructions files, and it works around the problem. And it's very strange to see that. I've never released a product like this where the end user can just very easily and quickly work around an issue. So we're still finding little bits and pieces and people, but if you do find any issues, don't just put it into your own Claude MD file or your instruction file in Cursor. Please let us know so that we can go in and fix it internally and fix it for everybody.
I think Phil, it might be a feature actually. Like it won't be disturb you, right? They can fix it by their own actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or do a pull request.
Yeah.
So that we have had a few of those people coming in and pull requesting it.
Maybe this session might be the more people will try it out maybe after this session, so they will get some insights about the MCP. So it's a time to explore, and maybe you can expect more issues in the GitHub. So yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. As I very much see, you're not going to offend me by sending an issue. I see them as a gift because they are there to improve things.
Yeah.
Very much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think everyone is. No one has any doubts. It's actually we need to wind up on 5 o'clock, but still there is any doubt you can ask. Otherwise, we can wind up the session. I think.
Okay, I've got
Yeah.
one question.
Yeah.
I feel so. It might be a silly question, but I'll still ask. So my question is, when you give a prompt, like for example, you gave this example of telling the MCP server to move all the unused data types to the unused folder. Okay, so if suppose when I cross verify, it has done some mistakes. Okay, it has basically moved a data type which was used. Is there a way to revert it back? Do I need to give it another prompt to tell it to revert it back?
So yeah, absolutely. I released a video on my LinkedIn last week about this very thing. And the great thing about this is if your current session is still open, it still understands everything that's happened in that session. So the best thing to do is to get it to check, to go through and to check things, and then to get it to rewind. And I did this in the video. So in the video, I was updating a rich text editor that happened to have a series of blocks with some new text in it, and the LLM went along and completely removed my blocks from there and added new text in, which I didn't want it to do. I wanted it to add text and keep the remaining blocks in there. And I just said to it, oh, you've deleted my blocks in my rich text editor, just revert that. And it did straight away because it understood. It had read that information. It still had it in context, so it could just take that information and put it back in. And you know, it's really, I think it's really important to realize that mistakes will happen, but you can use the ALM to revert and to roll back. And especially so. Well, I have this question all the time because of its non-deterministic nature as to how you can make that make the outcome as good as it possibly be, and how you can roll back from errors. And this is going to be one of the focuses of the editor MCP, is making sure that rollbacks work really well. Rollbacks are integrated into the Umbraco MCP, the developer one, already. So if you ask it to roll back to a specific version, it will do already. I just want to make that process a little bit more obvious for more editor-based MCPs. But then for things like document types and data types and things like that, we always recommend that you don't run this against production for a start. We say that about this because it's too magical. It's got too much power, this thing. Even if you remove tools, etc., it's still got too much power to do things. So, but we also say when you're using this locally, I would advise you use this alongside something like Umbraco Deploy or something like usync, so you have a way to roll back what you're doing. And usync is, especially locally, is very, very good at that, because things will go wrong. We see this all the time. I test and I use MCP all the time, and you know, it may be bugs that I've created that I'm fixing, but I've seen it do some crazy stuff. So having usync or deploy there can make things so much better for you and be able to roll back from these inevitable scenarios that you'll have.
Yep.
So it wasn't
Got
a
it.
silly
Thank
question
you.
at all. It wasn't a silly question. It was a very good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Deb, for the wonderful question, actually. So is there any question else we can wind up? Yeah, I think no other question. So Phil, thank you for the amazing session. Seriously, it was very, very insightful for us. It is a new start for us. Most of the attendees, we will explore the MCP, and definitely, as you said, we will put it as, if there is anything that we find, we will create a issue, and you might need to send a gift for us if we are creating some issues, actually. So yeah, once again, thank you for taking your time and sit with us and educate us for regarding the MCP, and thank you for the thank you for everyone to join, actually. And yes, this was our last session on 2025, and as I from in the beginning of this meetup, as I said, like, thank you for everyone who support this meetup, and all the speakers who are participated throughout this year. and we are hoping that we will have much more engaging and meaningful sessions in coming years, 2026 actually, because the Umbraco 17 is released and it's very promising. So we have lots of sessions on top of Umbraco 17, like load balancing in back office and other stuffs actually. So we will focus on that on next year onwards. So yeah, thank you once again, everyone, and happy New Year, and advance happy New Year and advance Christmas for everyone. Bye bye. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.